Hey, welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're jumping into a really critical time in American history.
Hmm?
How the United States reacted when World War II first, kicked off in Europe.
Yeah, it's a huge topic, and it wasn't simple.
Not at all. It's a story full of different viewpoints and sort of a slow but definite change in how America saw its place.
A real evolution in thinking.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, and it's genuinely fascinating to see how it all unfolded.
Absolutely. It wasn't like flipping a switch for the U.S. to get involved.
Yeah.
There were deep divisions, a lot of soul-searching about what role America should play as the world was, heading towards war.
Right. So our goal today is to get a clear understanding of the main arguments
Yeah.
and the policies that shaped America's initial response.
Let's dive in. We can break down some of the key ideas that were floating around back then.
Okay, sounds good. So first thing maybe to get our heads around is the Nye Committee.
Ah, yes. The Nye Committee.
This is back in the 1930s, and it seems like it really shaped how many Americans felt about getting into another big European war.
It really did. What's interesting is that it looked back at America's involvement in World War I.
Okay, the previous war.
Exactly. And there was this growing suspicion kind of bubbling up
Yeah.
that maybe American businesses, the big banks, the companies making weapons,
The merchants of death, they call them.
was the term, yeah, that they had pushed the country into World War I for their own financial gain.
Wow.
The committee held hearings, put together reports. It seemed to support this idea, though, it was debated.
Right.
But the big thing was it tapped into this deep American suspicion of, powerful interests influencing foreign policy.
That sounds familiar even today.
It really does. So it definitely fueled that desire to stay out of future conflicts.
So it planted this seed of doubt maybe we'd been manipulated into the last war.
Exactly.
That must have really boosted the idea of staying out of the next one, right?
Excellent.
Which brings us to the isolationists. We hear that term a lot.
Mm-hmm.
What did it really mean for Americans back then?
Well, isolationism was a really powerful feeling in the 1930s, just widespread.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of people, the feeling was simply that the troubles brewing in Europe and Asia, they just weren't America's problem.
Focus inward.
Totally. The focus was very much on our own issues, especially, the Great Depression was still going on. Times were incredibly tough at home.
Can't forget that context.
No. And the memory of World War I, the sheer loss of life, the economic cost, that was still very, very fresh.
Yeah.
It left a lot of people with this deep desire to just avoid going through anything like that ever again.
It makes the isolationist view seem pretty understandable, actually.
It does. Protect your own, fix your own problems first.
But then you had another group, the interventionists, who saw things very, very differently.
Right. The flip side.
What were their main arguments? Why did they think America should get involved?
Well, the interventionists were looking at what was happening overseas, the rise of these really aggressive dictatorships.
Like Nazi Germany, fascist Italy.
Imperial Japan, exactly.
And they argued that America couldn't just ignore this.
Why not?
They felt it was a direct threat, a threat to democratic values everywhere, and ultimately a threat to American interests as well.
So not just Europe's problem.
Not in their view. Their thinking was, the U.S. couldn't just stand by and watch his regimes get stronger and grab more territory.
Mm.
They believed America had a kind of moral duty, but also a real strategic need to actively oppose this aggression.
So you can really feel that tension building.
Oh, definitely. Stay
Oh.
safe at home versus facing this growing threat.
Yeah.
Like watching a storm gather, deciding whether to hide or try to stop it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. A real sense of unease.
Mhm.
Now, to try and keep America out of this gathering storm, Congress passed a series of neutrality acts.
That's right. Several of them in the mid to late 30s.
What were these laws actually trying to do? The main goal was pretty clear. Limit how the United States could interact with countries that were at war.
Keep us untangled.
Exactly. The early acts basically said America couldn't sell weapons
Okay.
or lend money to countries that were fighting. The idea was to avoid those economic ties that, many believed had pulled the U.S. into World War I.
So a pretty firm line initially.
Very firm. Hands off.
Right. But then as things got worse in Europe, especially after the war started in 39,
Yeah, things escalated quickly.
I remember hearing about this cash and carry idea. How did that change the picture?
Okay, so cash and carry was a modification, a shift.
Mhm.
There was this growing feeling in the U.S. that, well, maybe we should help the countries fighting aggression, mainly Britain and France at that point.
But without getting too involved.
That was the idea. Cash and carry allowed warring nations to buy non-military goods from the U.S. But,
Yeah.
and here are the catches,
Huh.
they had to pay in cash immediately. No loans, no credit.
Got it. Cash in the barrel.
Right. And crucially, they had to transport the goods in their own ships.
Ah, so no American ships in the line of fire.
Precisely. It was an attempt to balance staying neutral, technically, with helping the Allies. It's a sort of halfway measure.
A cautious helping hand. Okay, then we get to President Roosevelt's Four Freedoms speech.
Mhm.
That was early 1941, right?
January 41, State of the Union.
Yep. This feels like a real turning point in how the issue is being talked about nationally.
I think it was. It was quite profound.
What were these freedoms and why did they hit home so much?
So Roosevelt laid out 4 fundamental freedoms that he believed everyone everywhere in the world should have.
Okay.
Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want.
Meaning, like, economic security.
Yeah, basic necessities, not living in poverty. And the 4th was freedom from fear.
Freedom from fear, meaning, like, fear of aggression, war.
Exactly. Fear of dictators, fear of military attack. What's really key here is how Roosevelt framed these.
How so?
He didn't just say these were American ideals. He presented them as basic human rights, universal.
Ah, okay. Bigger than just the U.S.
Right. And that provided this really powerful moral argument for why the United States should be deeply concerned about the dictatorships and their expansion. It started building the case for a more active American role by appealing to these shared human values.
It definitely sounds like a shift from just trying to avoid war to actually championing certain ideals on a global stage.
It was laying the groundwork, morally and ideologically.
And that leads us pretty directly to the Lend-Lease Act. This
Yeah.
feels like a really big step.
Huge step, March 1941.
What did this act actually allow the U.S. to do? Because
Right.
cash and carry wasn't enough anymore.
Right. By this point, Great Britain was really struggling. They were fighting Nazi Germany pretty much alone after the fall of France, and they were running out of money.
Couldn't afford the cash part of cash and carry.
Exactly. So Lend-Lease basically allowed the U.S. government to lend or lease, not sell, military equipment and other crucial supplies
Lend or lease.
to any country whose defense was seen as vital to the defense of the United States, which primarily meant Britain, but eventually included China, the Soviet Union, after they were invaded.
Got it. So we were essentially providing war materials on credit or just giving it to them.
Pretty much. It got around the whole issue of Britain being broke. It was a very pragmatic move.
But a clear signal away from neutrality.
Oh, absolutely. A massive departure. It meant the U.S. was becoming a major supplier for the Allied cause, even without formally being in the war.
So we became the quartermaster for the good guys, basically.
You could put it that way.
And around this time, Roosevelt also started using that phrase, arsenal of democracy.
Yes, another really powerful phrase.
What did he mean by that? What was the image he was trying to create?
He was highlighting America's incredible industrial power.
Our factories.
Our factories, our workers. He argued that the U.S. should become the primary producer of weapons, tanks, planes, ships, all the materials needed by the Allied nations fighting the Axis.
So America's strength wasn't necessarily sending soldiers yet,
Yeah.
but using our industrial might.
Exactly. The idea was that American factories could be the source, the arsenal, providing the tools needed by democracies around the world to defend themselves. Our economic strength deployed globally.
Makes sense. We'd be the workshop providing the tools for freedom.
Yeah.
Okay, now, shifting slightly, but still in this period before Pearl Harbor, the Atlantic Charter.
Right. August 1941.
Roosevelt meets Churchill on a ship out in the Atlantic. What was the significance of this?
It was quite remarkable, actually. Here you have the leaders of the U.S. and Britain meeting secretly, and they issued this joint statement, the Atlantic Charter. What's fascinating is that it laid out their shared goals for the world after the war.
Even before the U.S. was officially in the war.
Exactly. They were already thinking ahead.
What kind of goals were in it?
Things like the right of all people to choose their own form of government self-determination,
Okay.
the restoration of democratic rule in countries that had been invaded and occupied,
Right.
and a commitment to creating some kind of system of international cooperation, collective security to prevent future wars.
Sounds a bit like the seeds of the United Nations.
Very much so. It was essentially a blueprint for the kind of world they wanted to build after defeating the Axis. an ideological foundation for the Allied cause.
Definitely forward-thinking.
Hmm.
Now, we've mentioned the Allies and the Axis powers quite a bit. Just to be clear, who were the main players on each side?
Sure. So the Allies, these were the nations fighting against the Axis.
Yeah.
Initially, the main ones were those first attacked, like Great Britain, France, Poland.
Mm,
But as the war spread, the alliance grew. It came to include the Soviet Union after Hitler invaded them.
right.
Eventually, of course, the United States, plus many others like Canada, Australia, China.
Okay, a big coalition.
Hmm.
And the Axis,
The Axis powers were primarily Germany, Italy, and
the
Japan.
main aggressors.
Right. They had formed alliances based on their shared goals of, well, aggressive expansion in Europe, Africa, and Asia. So these two major blocs facing off.
Got it. And then the event that just changed everything, the one that forced America's hand completely.
Pearl Harbor.
December 7th, 1941. Can you just walk us through what happened and why it was such a pivotal, shattering moment?
It was a complete surprise attack by the Imperial Japanese Navy, launched against the American naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii.
Early Sunday morning.
Yeah, it was devastating. A huge portion of the U.S. Pacific Fleet battleships, cruisers, aircraft was destroyed or heavily damaged.
And the human cost.
Tragic. Thousands of American servicemen were killed or wounded.
And before this attack,
Mhm.
there was still a lot of debate about getting fully involved.
Oh, yes. Significant opposition. Even with Lend-Lease and Roosevelt's efforts, the isolationist sentiment was still strong. Many people still desperately wanted to stay out.
But Pearl Harbor changed that instantly.
Completely. It just shattered any remaining hopes of neutrality. The attack on American soil, the sheer scale of it, it instantly unified public opinion in a way nothing else had.
A date which will live in infamy.
Roosevelt's words. The very next day, December 8th, the U.S. declared war on Japan.
And then Germany and Italy declared war on the U.S.
They did just a few days later, honoring their pact with Japan, and the U.S. immediately declared war back on them.
So that was it. America was fully in World War II.
That was the moment, a dramatic, unavoidable turning point for American foreign policy and really for the whole World War.
It's hard to overstate the impact of that day.
Impossible.
So if we try and sum all this up, America's initial reaction to World War II starting was really driven by this strong desire to avoid another big, costly overseas war.
Yeah, heavily influenced by WWI, the Nye Committee findings, that strong isolationist feeling.
And the Neutrality Acts were the policy reflection of that.
Definitely, trying to legislate neutrality.
But as the war got worse,
Mhm.
and the threat from the Axis powers seemed clearer,
Mm-hmm.
especially with Roosevelt pushing for more involvement,
Mm-hmm.
we saw that gradual shift.
Step by step. Policies like cash and carry, and then the much bigger step of Lend-Lease.
Moving towards supporting the Allies without actually fighting.
Right. The For Freedom speech provided that moral justification.
Yeah.
And the U.S. geared up to become the arsenal of democracy.
But ultimately, it took a direct attack.
It did. Pearl Harbor completely flipped the script, pushing the nation from that sort of reluctant, halfway-in position.
To full-scale participation in World War II. A total transformation.
That's a really clear way to put it. It shows that tension, perfectly wanting to stay out versus realizing you maybe can't.
Absolutely. It's amazing to see how all these different ideas, pressures, and events just collided to shape America's path.
It really highlights how major shifts in foreign policy aren't usually simple. They're messy, driven by lots of factors and changing realities.
Yeah, for sure. So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something maybe to chew on. Considering how reluctant America was at first, and then how quickly things changed after Pearl Harbor. How might the war have gone differently if the U.S. had jumped in, really intervened, much earlier?
That's a big what if.
It is.
Yeah.
And maybe more broadly, what are the key things, do you think, that can push a nation from neutrality, from wanting to stay out, to full-on involvement in a huge global conflict?
Yeah, what are those tipping points it's worth thinking about? And to help you consider that further, maybe ask yourselves a few questions.
Okay.
Can you explain the main arguments of both the isolationists and the interventionists back then? What were they really saying? What were the key rules in the Neutrality Acts, and how did they evolve with things like cash and carry?
Right. How do they change?
How did the Lend-Lease Act really signal a major change in American policy? What did it allow?
Yeah.
What were those four freedoms Roosevelt talked about, and why were they seen as so important?
The universal ideas.
Exactly. And finally, what was the specific significance of the attack on Pearl Harbor in getting America fully into World War II? How did it change everything?